Friend or foe, we'll talk about the last 11 games and discuss some trends for each of these players. How can they shift the narrative for themselves? We'll get to that. Plus, yeah, Doug has another mock draft. It's what he's promised, and he's delivering on the second day of Doug Branson mock drafts. That's all today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast, and that does include YouTube. There's Doug Branson. You can find him on his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. You can also listen to him on Locked On NBA, his other pod with Matt Moore and Hayes. I'm Walker Mehl. You can listen to me, WFNZ, every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. And finally, we do have a newsletter. Do you think the newsletter stops being new after this season, or will it still be new when we get to the offseason?
It's going to be new until the Hornets make the playoffs. I won't even say win a playoff series, which they haven't done in over 2 decades. I'll just say it's going to be new until this godforsaken team makes the playoffs.
It's your one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. You can sign up for free right now, LockedOnDaily.com.
I'm
That's
fine.
LockedOnDaily.com. We're all fine. Start your day with the all-new free and fine Locked On Hornets newsletter. Trend lines. So Cleaning the Glass does this. I think you use this a little more than I do. I should be using it. It's a fun tool to see what these players have been performing like all throughout the season, and it gives you a nice little graph. You can follow the line. It goes up and down. If you're a good player, it usually stays above what the median is. It means you're an above average player for this stretch of time. A lot of times when you watch Hornets trend lines, they're below that median. They're below what the average says you should be playing like as an NBA player. But we have 11 games here, Doug. We have 11 more games to go in the season. And I really think that there are some players that are setting themselves up for positive trends, real momentum shifts entering the offseason to where you can feel good about a player despite what they might have done in the first half of the season, or you can feel bad about a player, or maybe they've just already set themselves up for failure. There's nothing that they can really do. A final 10-game stretch, it might not move the needle at all on some of these guys. And so I wanted to discuss some of those players. We should probably lead with LaMelo. It's the A block. He's the all-star. He's the guy on the team that has seen the most success, I guess, maybe with Miles, but LaMelo got the all-star appearance. So let's start with LaMelo. How do you feel, or do you think that LaMelo Ball can change some momentum here? What is the trend line a trend to friend, or is the trend to foe, to go with your category, your title here?
Well, right now it's a foe. I mean, everything's trending down. I mean, you look at game score, which sort of takes all of those box score stats and jams them all together, the positive and the negative, and comes up with your impact on the game. His impact on the game was incredible, like all-star level, even though he didn't make the all-star game pre-all-star break. And then post-all-star break, it has just slowly trended down until it's sitting around the position average right now. So his season average is like 17. Position average is around 12. And that's where he sits right now. So he's just playing like an average player. And I think a lot of that is his three-point shot completely abandoning him consistently. We've seen a few games here and there where he's been able to knock them down. And to me, a lot of that breaks down to 2 things. One, there isn't a lot of shot-making talent around him, so defenses are allowed to play him aggressively and pick and roll. And then that then sort of leaks into the second thing, which is his shot decisions. You know, I wrote this in every Hornets box score in the last game. I've been doing this sort of trend of good, bad, and I did it with Mark Williams. Good when he shoots anywhere around the rim, bad when he shoots anywhere else. Well, for LaMelo Ball, it's good whenever he's taking a 3 assisted in rhythm, bad whenever he's pulling up. Because his pull-up jump shot right now is not working for him. He's not been able to find it. And when he's played better over the last 5 to 10 games has been when he's abandoned that pull-up shot in favor of finding plays for other people. because that's where he can make an impact on the game as well.
Yeah, the last 11 games, the schedule doesn't have a ton of juggernauts. You have you have back-to-back games against the Celtics at the end of the season, but the Celtics might be resting a lot of their guys. Now, they're just so deep and good that it might not matter, but they might be resting a lot of their guys because the Celtics, again, you have them the last 2 games of your regular season. The other opponents that you'll play, it's Orlando at home tonight. It's Toronto, New Orleans, Utah, Indiana, Sacramento, Chicago, Memphis, Toronto. So if you want to lose these games, then you probably would rather have a tougher schedule. So you can tank a little easier. If you are wanting to win these games, and that would be great. If you want to show positive signs of growth, then maybe these are the types of games that you would want. So maybe LaMelo and some of these other guys might be able to take advantage of these teams. Doug, you had a thought real quick.
Well, and even if so how would LaMelo change the trend? I think he would change it by performing in clutch situations. And I don't know that the Hornets are going to allow him to do that. There is a trend right now in the NBA where you've seen the Toronto Raptors, the Washington Wizards, the Utah Jazz, the New Orleans Pelicans, all of these teams that are tanking around the Charlotte Hornets. They've started doing this thing where even if games are close in the fourth quarter, they're pulling their stars, maybe for the entire fourth quarter, or this is more what I've seen the Charlotte Hornets do. They pulled LaMelo Ball in that game when he was on an absolute heater at the beginning of the second quarter against the Heat. He had 10 points within like 3 minutes, and it looked like he was going to put the Hornets so far ahead the Heat weren't going to be able to come back. Timeout, LaMelo's nowhere to be found. And again, I wrote in my notes, either Charles Lee is an expert tanker or he might be a bad coach. And I'm, you know what, just for the sake of my own mental, I'm just going to believe that it's the former. That he is doing what's best for LaMelo, doing what's best for the team long term, because how do you take him out in that position? They've also not played LaMelo in close fourth quarters or held him out in fourth quarters where I'm like, man, if you were really trying to win this game,
exactly,
you would have rode LaMelo there.
Exactly. That's why I believe it's the former as well. You went through the stats. I think that's the point I wanted to get to with you as well. I think LaMelo is probably one of those guys where we have our opinions made up on him right now that I'm not sure there's a lot that you can do, and I'm not sure there's a lot that he can do because of the situation he's in to really change your mind on what he is, how you should deal with him in the offseason. With 11 games to go, unless, of course, there's always the caveat that he just is in the 98th percentile in points per shot attempt every single game to close out the season. Yeah, if he just goes on a crazy heater, sure. But among realistic expectations that we have for all these players, I'm just not sure that there's a lot that LaMelo can do the last 11 games, where for me, I am one that would really like to see this thing through to next year, and there are others that don't. I understand exploring to trade him, but I just don't know if he's going to change a lot of people's minds over the last 11 games. Now, I think there are some players that really can change your mind based on how they've set themselves up, right? Because you almost have to be heading in one direction already anyway. So are you trending upward over the last 2 weeks or downward? We can go with Miles Bridges as that other guy. He's stalled out. So you had the 30-point per game average where only SGA was averaging more points per game, who I believe he's going to win the MVP. That was it. It was an impressive stretch of basketball. And Miles was contributing to winning in other areas. So it wasn't just that he was hitting a bunch of shots, right? He is, probably your best defender team-wise right now, your most reliable guy. Stalled out scoring, hasn't scored above 21 points in either of the last 5 games that he's played. But it's not like he's been playing so horribly that he can't salvage some even more trade value, right? Like, I think this can go either way, honestly, Doug. I think there's enough of a sample left to where you can maybe forget a little bit of what Miles did with that 30-point per game average stretch. But there's also enough to where if he gets to around 25 again, then you can just show a real large sample to all these other teams that either might want to trade for him or that you just roll into next season with somebody that has been reliable so much for you and is still your longest tenured player here. I think it could go either way. My guess is that because he cares, I think it's actually going to continue to trend upwards. Even if it's been a little average now, I think, or at least the last 5 games, I think he probably will trend upward. How do you feel about where Miles Bridges is heading?
I hope he trends upward because I think it's going to be, if they do want to trade him, and I'm not sure they do, but if they do want to trade him, it's going to be a more difficult sale because it was already going to be a difficult sale because you really have to say, hey, look at this section of games. This is what Miles Bridges can be. That's what you have to do because if you look over the entire season, he's still been a below average efficiency player offensively. And although defensively, I think he's improved this season. So I think it would be easier to look at that section of games if he doesn't completely fall back to earth. Because right now, if you look over the past like 10 to 15 games, even with these past couple of stinkers, his like rolling averages are well above position average. It's like the player that everybody wants, that the Hornets have wanted for a long time. But the reason that's a tough sale is because it's coming in March when nothing matters. That's a tough sale with all of these players, whether you're selling the fan base on them being better next season. Clifford used to talk about this all the time. You have to be careful with March numbers when things become meaningless for the team. It's tougher to evaluate individual player statistics. So, but it's much easier if you're just talking about a trade scenario to do that if a player doesn't completely crater, in the back half of March and into April.
I do think, Miles, where last year we talked about with the idea of trading him, that it probably is hard to just bring him and say, go fit with the team however you deem fit, right? We'll just figure it out. He doesn't shoot very well. And that's been true except for the one season that he had earlier in his career, but he still isn't shooting at a high percentage. So if you can shoot, the more you can shoot, the more malleable that you are within an offensive system, and he just can't do that. So you probably need some space for him to be able to operate well enough. But what I do like, Doug, I do think what's happened with Miles is that he's gotten so much better defensively that now that he's a little bit more malleable anyway, right? Like now, if he's not helping you by not hitting shots, he can help you defensively. I think his playmaking has gotten better. I think he is attacking gaps. We know how dangerous Miles is when he gets downhill, even if he doesn't have the same athleticism as he did when he was younger, although we've seen some of that bounce that he promised was coming back this year. We have seen some of that this season. I do think that he has allowed his game to be more well-rounded. And now I think even if he continues what he's done the last 5 games, right? Let's say he doesn't overshoot it. Let's say he doesn't, drastically underperform, which I don't think is going to be the case for him. I actually highly doubt that the latter will happen. I do think now he's become a more sought after target for teams out there because, hey, even if he's not hitting a bunch of threes, he has that capability. It's not like it's completely absent from his game, and he helps you in a lot of other ways. So now I feel a lot better making this risk, even if he continues his 34% three-point shooting percentage.
Yeah, no, there are a few other players I want to talk about. Yep. I'll just very quickly mention that a big differentiator between efficient Miles Bridges and inefficient Miles Bridges offensively is how much he's attacking those gaps and how much he's getting to the line. If you just go through that section of games through like the middle of March to the beginning of or the end of February, where he was just constantly the leader of this team in terms of offensive efficiency, in terms of really everything, it was consistently getting to the line for 6 or more attempts, and then sometimes getting into like the 9, 10. One game he was 12 of 13 against Cleveland in that close loss. So, yeah, you've got to have a Miles Bridges who is attacking, constantly getting to the free throw line. He wasn't doing that early in the season.
And he knows that. He's talked about that a lot.
Oh, yeah.
I think the self-recognition on that, too, is important, and he's been carrying that out on the court more often than not. All right, coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees everywhere!
Let's continue this conversation. A lot more interesting players, honestly, to have this conversation about. Plus, we'll get to the mock drafts, all coming up on Locked On Hornets. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. With all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, you can go beyond just managing money and start building wealth. You might be surprised at how much you're spending on things like food delivery or streaming subscriptions. With Monarch, you'll see exactly where your money is going so you can budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, Monarch makes it easy to check your finances, track spending, and even plan for long-term goals all in one place. And if you're managing money with a partner, it's never been smoother. You can track shared and personal accounts, you can set goals together, and you can stay on the same page without the stress. That's the important part. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. More Locked On Hornets ahead. We've gone through LaMelo. We think probably can't do a whole lot to change the narrative the last 11 games. Miles Bridges, trend, friend or foe? Let's give the official stamp of friend or foe. I think the final 11-game trend for LaMelo, well, I can't give the official stamp. I don't think it's going to be either one. I think it's going to be neutral. I think it's going to be an acquaintance. I don't think he's going to be a friend.
No, I think it's going to be a foe. I think it's going to,
okay.
and that has nothing. That has less to do with LaMelo than just the circumstances that would allow him to perform and change the trend. And because I don't think they're going to be in a lot of clutch situations or that he'll play in those situations, I think it's going to be a foe. Okay,
I'll go acquaintance. I'm not playing the game right. I apologize. Miles, I think it'll be a friend still. I think he's shown enough to where this last 11-game stretch is going to be a friend. I also think it's going to be a friend for Mark. Doug, you're going to have to probably talk me down a little bit on Mark again. I'm starting to feel things.
Boy, here we go.
I'm starting to feel things about Mark. In all seriousness, he's shown me something different the last couple of weeks, man. He is. I think what you've seen from him is real growth in areas that you want to see growth in. I think he is battling more. I think another thing that I'm really interested in is there were a couple of times in this last game against Miami where he was calling out defensive communications. I saw James Plowright put a clip out on this, but I saw another play actually that came to mind besides the one that he showed on Twitter, where he's calling out backline stuff and he's hustling over to get to his assignment while directing traffic in the paint and also getting over in time, which was a real issue. And Doug, remember, we talked about it earlier in the season where Mark's timing on some of these blocks on defense, he just wasn't getting there fast enough. So his size, he wasn't playing as big as his body tells you. He wasn't playing as big as the 9'9" standing reach because, one, he was getting moved out of the paint, which probably will always be an issue for him. He's just not going to be as girthy as you would want your center to be to bang down low. But if you can get over and block some shots and your block percentage goes up, well, okay, now we're cooking. And that's exactly what's happened. The block percentage is starting to go way up. We're seeing him get over in time. Offensively, he's starting to really help with these LaMelo lobs again, but also just seems to be playing more with more confidence offensively. And now we're also seeing a stretch of games to where the activity, it has continued, right? There's not really been these lulls. Maybe there's a game here and there, but there's really not been these large stretches of, Mark, what are you doing? Like, he's running the floor. There was the Tijon fast break where Tijon, it's funny. It was like Mark realized, oh, God, Tijon has the basketball in the open court. If nobody runs with him, then there's a real opportunity that he dribbles off his foot, does 3 spin moves and travels or whatever if he doesn't give it up. So he runs the floor with Tijon. And because of that, you have numbers. Tijon recognizes it, dishes it, and Mark gets an easy dunk. I really, really like what I see from Mark lately. It's a friend. It's a friend.
You're the character in the musical that just starts to float as you're about to hit your musical number, and I'm the character that's like got to grab your foot and bring you back down to the ground.
No, let me fly.
So can the upcoming schedule be his friend or foe? I do see a little 3-game stretch here at the beginning of April. So they play at home on all of these games. They play against Sacramento, against Chicago, and against Memphis, 3 teams that will feature centers that are physical, sometimes too physical. Sabonis, I don't know if you saw him, almost take out Jason Tatum and ruin the playoffs. Thanks, Dom.
Yeah.
But very physical inside play. And so I think, if he plays, how much he plays in that 3-game stretch and how he plays in that 3-game stretch, I think will go a long way. Because for me, it's always been matchups There have been, when he puts up big numbers, it's typically against teams whose centers don't want to do those things, or the Hornets kind of give Mark a get-out-of-jail-free card and use Miles Bridges to guard certain players instead of Mark Williams. I hope that Charles Lee, in the same way that he was challenging Moussa Diabate to play the 4 to take some jump shots, will do the same thing for Mark Williams late in this season. Challenge him to play more physical. And I will say with you that he has at least been more physical in terms of offensive rebounding. I want to see him continue to be more physical when it comes to defensive rebounding, when it comes to finishing possessions, so it doesn't take an entire team effort to defensive rebound, because what having like a forced defensive rebounder does for you in terms of the way the game is played today, which is incredibly faster. I just saw this crazy stat. The 7 seconds or less Phoenix Suns. You recall that team, right?
Oh, yeah,
Steve
sure.
Nash. We view that team, right, as they played incredibly fast, way faster than their generation counterparts. They are the quintessential speed team. They would rank 28th in pace this season. The game is fast, okay? What having someone that can not only command the defensive rebounding by himself and outlet pass does for you is it allows everyone else, or at least one or two players, to free themselves, to go out and start that break, okay? If you have to team rebound, that puts you at a little bit of a disadvantage. So that's what I want to see from him in this last stretch, and I think those 3 games in particular I've got my eye on.
Okay, what next? Who do you think is the next player that we should discuss? Let's go one more player and then move on to the next segment. Who's the next player that you think these last 11 games will be particularly interesting for?
Yeah, we've been teasing this for a couple of episodes now. It's Nick Smith Jr. I think his trend line right now, if you look at game score, effective field goal percentage, assist percentage, a lot of the stats that you would look at for a player of Nick Smith Jr.'s size and skill set, right now they're starting to trend up. It's not like crazy, he's not skyrocketing, but it's starting to tick up. And if he can continue that trend through the end of the season, take good shots, make open shots, make good reads, not make great reads, not make incredible passes, but just make the smart play for the rest of the season, and then go into the offseason with a focus of getting stronger or watching some tape on Jose Alvarado and finding a way to impact transition possessions, even though you are slight. If you can do all of those things, I'm ready to believe in Nick Smith Jr., but I have to see it continue through March and April, because he's going to get more burn. He's going to get an opportunity as you start to see LaMelo shut it down a little bit. I really want to believe in Nick Smith Jr., and I think he's got an opportunity at least to have me wondering about him into next season.
The good news is that, again, with these opponents that you have on the schedule, there's a lot of teams that are below, that are 16th or behind in defensive efficiency.
Yeah.
And I think when you talk about, you have a game against New Orleans, that's the worst defensive team in the league. You have a game against Utah, that's the 3rd worst defensive team in the league. You have teams like Toronto and Indiana who are right there. Actually, Indiana's been a little bit better than average, but they're still really closer to average than they are any kind of juggernaut. They're not in the top 10 or anything like that. So I think with some of these teams that you're talking, Chicago is towards the bottom in team defense. I guess I'll just be Mr. Positive. He's going to get the opportunity. He played 38 minutes in this last game against Miami. Just
played
because,
well.
right, it goes to what you were talking about with LaMelo, where LaMelo probably just isn't going to have the opportunity to really make these last 11 games a friend for him. Nick Smith Jr. is going to get all the run he wants to. And that's kind of been the story for him this year, whether it's been planned or unplanned. It was planned to give him all the run in Summer League. It wasn't so much planned to give him all the run earlier in the year, but then injuries happen, and then guys don't come back, and now here he is getting close to 40 minutes in an NBA game. I'll go friend. Not a lot of strong defenses. Nick Smith Jr. playing with some confidence. He set himself up to go into these last 11 games with some confidence. I'll go friend for him, friend for Mark, friend for Miles, acquaintance for LaMelo. So I guess I'm just going to be Mr. Positive today. That's how I'll finish.
Yeah, I'm going foe for LaMelo, friend for Miles, friend for Mark Williams, if in those 3 games, and friend for Nick Smith Jr. So, yeah, look at us. A couple of positive people after all of these losses.
All right.
Maybe we're just sick.
All right. One more segment to go. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
This is the low bar. We are drunk in the low bar is what we are.
Yeah, very much so.
Bees everywhere!
Are there Baileys in this coffee?
Fill it up!
Anyways, we have a preview against the Magic, and plus Doug, it's time. He'll give you another mock draft. Coming up next, LOH. Let's do the mock draft thing here first before we give you a preview against Orlando. Yesterday, Sam Vecini had us taking VJ Edgecombe after a 16-point performance in a season-ending loss to Duke in the NCAA tournament. VJ, we know about his defensive prowess. We had some comments yesterday, I noticed, Doug. People saying we're sleeping way too much on VJ. I'm sleeping on everybody right now. I'm actually snoozing. You can see the Z's when it comes to my draft research because I'm just not doing it. So not right now. Not with Panthers free agency, Panthers draft stock stuff to talk about. I am dabbling, but you're right. I am sleeping. I do like what I've seen so far from VJ. So is there going to be another player that we dissect in this mock draft? Doug, talk to the people.
Yeah, I'm not sleeping on VJ. I'm open to VJ. I am worried that he's 6'5". I look at Ace Bailey and I see a 6'10" player, and I just want the Hornets to go, 6'9" or above on all these draft picks and mimic some of the teams that I see winning right now that don't have a lot of 6'2" to 6'5" players in their starting lineup. So that's all I'm saying right now. Now, so again, I'm open to someone coming along and saying, no, he plays bigger, or that it doesn't matter that he's 6'5" because of X, Y, and Z. I'm open to that. We just have to get it into our research. Really quickly, I want to go to Tankathon because we've been doing a lot of looking ahead to the schedule. So after this Orlando game tonight, they play Toronto, New Orleans, and then Utah. That is a tank stretch right there of teams that are all trying to be bad, and they have one more game against Toronto. So those games should get interesting, strategic, as these teams all look to improve their draft spot. And New Orleans only a game back of the Hornets right now for the 3rd spot. And that 3rd spot is important because that is the last spot that has the highest odds, 14%, at the number 1 overall selection. So things about to get interesting for all of these teams. Should note they're 2.5 games back of 2, Charlotte is, and 3 games back of being the worst team. Man, I think the Hornets would have to lose out to really contend, I think, for that, the top spot. So I think they're probably going to end this thing in the 3rd spot. So my mock draft today is going to come again from Jonathan Wasserman of Bleacher Report because he just updated his 2-round predictions and pro comps before the Sweet 16. Number 1 going to the Wizards and Cooper Flagg. Number 2, the Utah Jazz select Dylan Harper out of Rutgers. And number 3, Charlotte Hornets again selecting VJ Edgecombe out of Baylor. Wasserman writing that VJ Edgecombe looked as advertised in the NCAA tournament, leaving his mark on both games, mostly by making athletic plays at both ends and attacking the basket. His unmatched explosion, passing, motor, and 52 made threes more than shot-making expert Ace Bailey could give him an edge over the Rutgers wing.
So you mentioned the lack of size that some of these competitive teams have. I think that's true to some degree if it's all about the offensive creation at that size, right? So Cleveland has 2 guys that aren't very tall. I think Donovan Mitchell is 6'5", and Darius Garland is not as tall as Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell, freak athlete. VJ has that. So I think maybe that's kind of the mold you would be hoping for offensively. Remember, Donovan was not tabbed as this knockdown shooter. Maybe that's it. And a better defender, VJ is tabbed as Donovan comes in. So maybe that's the comp. Maybe we just kind of stumbled into that.
Well, it's all about trade-offs, right? Because you mentioned Cleveland there. They also have the person that's probably going to win Defensive Player of the Year in Evan Mobley sitting on the back line.
Yep.
So if the Hornets, if I were confident, I'm getting a little bit more confident in Mark's defense, but if I were super confident, then obviously I would have no problem
he's not
with
Mobley.
taking someone small.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say it right now. I'm going to be biased because I want Brandon Miller to play too. And I've said this in a previous episode. how you feel. If they do hit 3, the debate is going to be Edgecombe versus Bailey. And I think some of that debate is going to come down to, do you see Brandon Miller as a 2 or do you see him as a 3? Because I think Ace Bailey can play the 3 or can develop into that player and allow you to play Brandon Miller at 2.
Yeah, but I just to throw something that you've thrown a million times on this podcast right back at you. You cannot make decisions based in the draft based on what you have on this roster right now, right? Like you can't. If VJ Edgecombe is the guy, then Brandon Miller being on this team can't dictate what you do with that 3rd, 4th, 2nd overall pick. I do understand though. I like Brandon Miller being having the ability to play 2, but you can still do that. Like you can have VJ and Brandon Miller not be on the floor at the same time all the time. And yeah, if VJ is the guy, then he's the guy. But I get your point. Go ahead.
By the way, Derek Queen jumping in this mock draft from, before this tournament, I saw him in the 13 all the way down to 16 range. In Wasserman's latest mock draft, he is up to the 5 spot to the Brooklyn Nets. And by the way, the Hornets could easily be in the 5th slot. Like the odds are, I think their highest individual pick odds end up being 6th. Although if you mash all of the odds of 1 through 5 together, it's still more than likely they're going to be 5th or higher. But they can definitely fall. And so Derek Queen at 5, definitely a reality. But are you thinking they're falling a little too much in love with the guy who hit the big shot in the tournament?
No, I think because I've seen a few more mock drafts have him a little closer to the top and inside the top 10, inside the top 8, top 5 is probably the highest I've seen him, though. He's just so damn skilled. He's offensively, he is so fun, and he's a total baller. And apparently in the huddle, he said, "Give me the mother bleeping ball," and then he went to go shoot it.
Say it like the coach did. Say it like the coach did, because that's funnier. Give me the MF ball.
Give me the MF ball. That's right. Give me the MF ball. And he delivered on it, even if there might have been a travel. But he delivered on it. So it's all about defensively, are you just going to be so frustrated with Derek Queen, or is he going to provide you enough offensively to where you just don't care? I do worry about the defense. I think he's probably food right now, Doug. I have, anyways, just the way that he moves defensively. I know there's he's a good shot blocker, but if you get him in motion, you get him up there on the perimeter, there might be some problems. I do want to go back to VJ just for a moment. Just if you roll with LaMelo or Brandon, if that's what you're going to do next season, if both of those guys are going to be on the floor, I do like the idea of one, especially an idea you would like, not as much Josh Green. So you have VJ as your defensive guy. You put him on one of these fantastic point guards that are in the league. I mean, this league is saturated with excellent point guards. So you put VJ on the point guard defensively. You put Brandon Miller on whoever the next best player on the perimeter is. It feels like you could probably hide LaMelo a little bit more within your younger core, and you still got some work to do defensively. But if you can put VJ as this athletic 6'5", big enough, for the lead ball handlers for a lot of other teams, for almost all other teams, then I do like that idea defensively, because I think the problem with some of these guys that are a little too small is that they don't provide enough defensively, right? Jalen Brunson is another man that comes to mind. Dude is awesome, okay? Like, he can score a whole bunch, and they run everything through him up in New York, which is why they're struggling with Jalen Brunson not being out there on the court. But Jalen Brunson still gets attacked defensively. Yeah. It's just they have this team that's so well-rounded around him with Mikal, with OG Anunoby, that they can defend and pick up some of his deficiencies defensively. Well, at least VJ wouldn't be that, right? If you're smaller, at least you have defensive capabilities to where you don't play as small as what your 6'5" height might say. And it's not like he's 6'2". It's 6'5" is fine enough. Yeah. I would like to be a little taller at 2, but it's fine enough. It's not Reed Shepherd, who we also liked as your offensive shooter last year that we were really considering. It's a little small, but it's not, ooh, buddy. Yeah, you do so many other things well that I'm going to have to swallow this height, but it's a lot smaller than I'd like.
No, listen, I'm with you, and I don't think that this draft, if they land in the three spot, I think it will be a debate, but I don't think it's going to be a Scoot Brandon type of thing where you have two very different roads you can go down. I think it's going to be more of, well, this, that both good players with slightly different skill sets, and you're going to have to make decisions based on that. But I think it's going to be interesting because if they land in the top 5, the Hornets have an option to take a defensive playmaker. If they land outside of the top 5, if they hit 6 or 7 or they trade back, they're just not there. You're probably going to be looking at an offensive first player.
Yeah.
So that's something interesting to watch. How many days do I have left? How many mock drafts do I have left?
I mean, I didn't do the exact math, but it was close to 90. I mean, you think about it, June 25th. We're about 3 months away from the NBA draft. So it's a
90-day plan, 90 mock drafts, get us back on track. Okay. 90 mock drafts. It's a 90-day, 90 mock draft, 1 mock draft per day. We get the 90 mock drafts. We're back in business, baby.
Because it's the bullet point and we often avoid the preview bullet points, give me just a quick sentence on a Magic Hornets preview.
Magic's still really good at defense. They're starting to find their offensive rhythm as well. Paolo Banchero is starting to figure it out again. They just beat the Lakers, so they're coming in with a lot of confidence. They are going to be fighting like hell because they want to improve their spot within the play-in, or maybe even hold on to some fringe hope of getting out of the play-in, although I don't think that's a possibility. They turn teams over a ton, and they love to score on those. I think they're averaging like 19 points a game on turnovers. Turnovers murdered the Hornets against the Heat, also a team known for turning other teams over. So if the Hornets take care of the basketball, they've got an opportunity to be competitive in this game. But if we see sort of second half type of sloppiness, really second half plus type of sloppiness that we saw in the last game, they're going to lose by 20, 25.
Hornets could possibly get to the free throw line tonight because Orlando is the most fouling team in the NBA. So expect to get to the free throw line, got to hit your free throws. Maybe this is a Miles Bridges game where he gets to the line. Maybe LaMelo, dare I say, actually gets to the line and tries to make that trend line a friend for him by becoming more efficient at the charity stripe.
The Magic have beaten the Hornets plus 52 this season in 3 matchups. This is the final matchup. It is mercifully ending.
Okay. That'll do it for Locked On Hornets. This podcast is mercifully ending. That's our motto. It's Doug Branson, Locked On NBA, also everyhornetsboxscore.com. Check him out at both places. I'm Walker Mehl. You can listen to me, WFNZ, every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow.